Okay, hi everybody. Here we are again. Let me just make sure the sound that we have. Yeah, we're fine. Okay, so you have to hear me. Welcome. We're going to continue talking about Spanish cinema today. Hispanic cinema. That I asked her to watch Las Bestias, the Beasts, the Argentinian film. A couple of reasons. It's a very low budget film. Uh, Again, it's a film you probably just but it's brought to my attention that themes would be quite similar to ones that it's very much. We talk now about different new Spanish cinema, but that theme of discovery that you see Pan's Labyrinth, a labyrinth of the Pan, um, Roma. And it's been a real boom in Latin American cinema over the last oof, 15, 20 years, especially last 10 years. Y tu mama también, and very much this idea of type of suspense films as such. Great expert in this is Mariano Paz, who's colleague there, and he's would be great in Latin American cinema. But so I want you to have and again a low budget film. And when we talk about Spanish cinema, to try and see if we can see links between Spanish, of course, there aren't, apart from the language, because a lot of Latin American directors would have been influenced, I would argue, by Spanish cinema more than American cinema. So when you look at a film like Las Bestias, which is an Argentinian film, I'd like you to compare it to a film that we mentioned last week. I'm going to go back to the Word document now. Um, and we spoke about The Spirit of the Beehive and that idea of discovery, definitely heavily influenced by The Spirit of the Beehive. Spirit of the Beehive, where we have obviously a deaf person in the forest. In The Spirit of the Beehive, we have the Republican prisoner, the idea of suspense being outside, allegorical, a lot of symbolism, that type of thing. Uh, Quite obvious what we had under, obviously Argentina's not, but we have coming out of dictatorships, quite similar in Spain. You have the legacy, the shadow of Francoism, while in Argentina, Argentinian cinema, you have the legacy of a military dictatorship, Galtieri, and you would have that in Brazilian cinema. You would have, and again, it gets back to what we are talking about earlier in this course. It's impossible to detach cinema from the socio-political, socio-cultural circumstances that it operates within, that being the country. So that's something I just want you to think about as we move towards film studies, that people say, oh, well, very liberal films that are shown or themes in Danish cinema, Dogma 95, Lars von Trier, reflect Danish society. Quite similar, Ingmar Berg would have reflected Swedish society. So that's something we want to look at. It's a very general kind of, I know some of you are dealing with that in essays, the question of cinema as a mirror of a society. Now it gets really interesting when you move to New Zealand society, move to Middle Eastern society, as we've seen, and as a mirror of their society. Yusuf Jahin in Egypt, we spoke about that. So again, I suppose what we'll keep trying to emphasize in this course is that traditionally one would see literature as an emphasis on literature and books, and you want to read about France in the 50s, what's literature at the time. But what I'm arguing here is that almost cinema, with this authoritarian directors, is perhaps a better mirror, a more authentic mirror, in that sometimes a literary mirror or poet, you know, can be very, very centered in the person, almost self-indulgent, while cinema, by its whole nature, okay, there isn't indulgent in centered around a certain director, but I would argue tends to present almost a more accurate representation of that cultural moment in time. So that link between film and culture we're always looking at. It's a kind of intellectual thing. So don't be worrying too much about it. But going back to Spanish cinema, let's get our document here now. word that we had. I'm getting a bit better at this. Okay, we had it, and right, and we spoke about last week about La Españolada, exaggerated forms of Spanishness, about Spanish Civil War, cinema, etc. Salamanca conversations, and then we came to that very important part, talking about the start of really Spanish art house cinema. Juan Antonio Bardem, Berlanga, the role of Buñuel, and Buñuel and Saura, and Carlos Saura in Spain. And it's those two directors, their films, if you wanted, we're moving there to. Franco dies in 75, as we said, but the same year comes out Cria Cuervos, Raised Ravens by Carlos Saura, wonderful film. A couple of years before, The Spirit of the Beehive, but it's really a film of the end of the Francoist by Victor Orife, who doesn't go on to make that The Quince Tree's Son, again, a very indulgent art house movie. El Sur he makes as well. But definitely a masterpiece, The Spirit of the Beehive. So, as we said, Franco dies November 20th. Immediately we have films coming out like Poachers, Raised Ravens at the time, which deal with the Francoist legacy. And then, as we said last week, what we have is this transition to democracy, El Destape, the lifting off of the lid, the years of craziness. There's a film, Torremolinos 1973, which came out about 15 years ago. It's an excellent film. It's about someone being caught around the time, not caught, that the influx of pornography into Spain, and he ends up as a star in a porn movie. And he's and it's about this era of great change, great sociocultural change in Spain in this transition to democracy. Spoke about last week, Lamont Beat, and that we have a new chronicle of civil war. So finally, Spain comes to terms with the civil war, with what happened. The films we mentioned there last week, The Long Holidays of 1936, Las Largas Vacaciones del 36, Bardem. Notice these are directors from the 50s, so there is that continuity in Spanish film. El Puente, The Long Weekend, Berlangues, Las Compañías Nacional. So these are the same people who made Nunca Pasa Nada, Calle Mayor, who chronicled Spain in the 50s, are now the chroniclers of a civil war 20, 25 years on. Camada Negra, about the attraction of fascism in Spain, a film which I think, 1977, Gutierrez Aragon, very strong film at the end and very powerful imagery. We talk about the importance of cinema in Spain. I think it's a film that needs to be watched again now with the rise of the far right in Spain. The VOX movement, and which is an avowed far right movement, which espouses Spanish identity, and almost in return to many of the ideas of the Francoist regime. So Camada Negra, and this is the kind of thing that, as you go on, I know we're only in an introductory course, I'd like you to be looking at and thinking about, well, I could do an essay on, kind of a relationship between a certain political party and a film as such. Snambulo 78 again. All these films chronicle the Civil War. Chavarris, El Desencanto, José Luis Garcís, Asignatura Pendiente. And Pilar Miró, who we mentioned last week, who went on to be Minister for Culture, tragically died very young. But El Crimen de Cuenca, again, a very, very strong film, Cuenca Crime, 79, about the Spanish Civil War and its legacy in Spanish society. We said Jaime Darminian, which would be in any there, El Nido, The Nest, and then documentaries. So we spoke about Basilio Martin Patino's Songs for After a War, and testimonial cinema. Rafa, Espirito Franco, which deals with that film that we spoke about last week, that Franco wrote a screenplay. So it's I suppose it's a documentary on the film and the making of it and how it was the spirit of Franco. And we finished last week. We spoke about suddenly this great era of opening up in Spanish culture, Spanish society. El Poder del Deseo, by Bardem. Again, this is Bardem making. Bardem who made these, which would be staid, conservative, serious movies in the 50s, is now making almost soft porn films. The El Poder del Deseo. Escriba, Vicente Escriba, with as the famous Sorrita Martinez, La Sorrita Boy, La Sorrita in Bikini. And Bridiano is premiered in Spain. Again, in cinema and Spanish society in general, you would have a huge, that a lot of films were released in Spain just in these late 70s. The Beatles went to number one in the late 70s in Spain. So very much it's a cultural term in Spain. I know it's el atraso, means backwardness. Spaniards have a great idea of this backwardness. Things happened afterwards. Quite similarly in Hispanic society, Argentinian, Brazilians under dictatorship. Suddenly, these films were released that had been seen. Woodstock for the first time shown on Spanish television. There's a great Spanish TV series, The Wonder Years. It's actually in the LRA, and chronicles this type of where the opening up of Spain, and words like avant-garde, la vanguardia is a big, even the big newspaper in Barcelona is called Catalunya, la vanguardia, to be at the avant-garde, to be at the front. So Spaniards love that at the moment, and it's a cultural thing, but cinema is chronicling this, where you have, for example, Spain at the forefront of fashion with Zara, Mango, Bershka, Stradivarius, Pull&Bear, Bear, and all this. Spain loves to be ahead because for so long, the same with the different Calatrava, who built that lovely bridge. I think he was involved in the bridge in Waterford, the bridge in Dublin, but to be at the forefront, to be ahead of because Spain was culturally behind for so long. So the el atraso, backwardness, is very important in Spanish cinema, Spanish culture in general. Again, films about Bodas de Sangre comes out, Saura and Carmen, 1983. Films which influence of La Españolada, based on Federico Garcia Lorca's Bodas de Sangre. So Elisa Vida Mia, Saura's 77. And in 82, an Oscars won. We just have to put that up. Jose Luis Garcia's Volver a Empezar. About a couple meeting again after many years, but it's a very beautiful film, but doesn't really fit into that genre of Spanish cinema at the time. It's a film apart, but it won the Oscar for Best Foreign Film, and it sort of catapulted Spanish cinema, I suppose, into an international stage. 10 years after, we're still talking about Franco has died, and the films are coming out little by little, trying to deal with the Francoist era. Erices El Sur, the South, 83, strong film. Chavarris, The Bicycles Are for Summer, Las Bicicletas Son para el Verano, 84. Gutierrez Aragon, who we mentioned, who did Camada Negra, now Demonios del Jardín. And these are all films dealing with the Franco. So cinema is seen, and this is, we saw it in Italy with Bertolucci, The Spider Stratagem, The Conformist. Cinema as a tool for dealing with the psychological recovery of a country from trauma. Be very interesting. We're living at the moment through very tragic times with what's happening in the Ukraine. None of us can deny that. And will cinema step up to this role and help us deal with it? Because we're seeing daily the destruction on a level which most of us in our lives have never seen before. So, I mean, I was quite disappointed. I think I mentioned this in earlier lectures that cinema, The Hurt Locker, was a film, but the Iraq War and that cinema didn't really step up to for us to talk about it. And the Iraq War, the legacy of the Iraq War is there in Donald Trump. It's there in Capitol Hill, in the invasion, attack on the, that's all a legacy which, in some ways, needs to be dealt with. Um, and how do we do it? Is it literature, music, cinema is a great tool as such. So hopefully it may help us in the aftermath of. We all hope for an aftermath of tragedy that's unfolding for the horizon at the moment. Fernando Fernan Gomez, Mambrú se fue a la guerra. Mambrú went to the war, again, 86, classic film about the Francoist era. Ascoritas La Sombra de Cypress es Alargada, Shadow of Cyprus is Long. And these are films, again, about, they're more suggestive. It's from a famous novel by Miguel Delibes. Around the same time comes out Dos Santos Inocentes, The Holy Innocents, again about this period. Fela's novels are brought to the screen, Pascual Duarte, La Familia Pascual Duarte. So they might be overtly about the war, but about that period in Spain and those years of repression. And you can see this on the screen, I think, actually better than you ever can. And I've read the books, but you can see in the screen in Los Santos Inocentes what a powerful film, The Holy Innocents. Mario Camus is the director. And bringing to the screen this type of the harrowing poverty and repressive nature of Spain during those years of 40s, 50s, etc. Basilio Martin Patino, Los Paraísos Perdidos, 85. The Lost Paradises, similar. El Mar y el Tiempo, a bit later, 89. And Saurus, which is I, Carmela, got a lot of coverage at the time, because Carlos Saura is this director who kind of spans all these periods. Maybe it's his last great work. And that's overtly about the Spanish Civil War, I, Carmela, and about Republicans and Franco, often held up as one of the seminal films documenting what really happened in the Spanish Civil War. Now I want to move on to something today, and that's two directors. We just need to want to know their names, want to talk about them. And that's new Spanish cinema. And that's what you'll hear mostly about now in new Spanish cinema. The poster boy is very much Pedro Almodovar. And some of you might be doing Spanish, and it's almost, we talk about the Spanish studies being out Francoized, over Francoized. It's over Almodovarized, and you'll hear completely in Spain. A lot of concentration about him. Juan José Bigas Luna, who passed away recently. Almodovar is still alive. But Bigas Luna, I've written a good bit about him, and can almost be seen as Almodovar with a social conscience. So they're Almodovar-esque films, but again, very representative, but with very much acidic social commentaries about things in Spain like corruption, rural life, about domestic abuse, male-female gender relations, which I would argue Almodovar shies away from, and Bigas Luna definitely does not. So we'll be talking about that in today's lecture. Almodovar comes from, there was an anti-cine movement, late 60s, 70s, a lot around Catalonia. Javier Aguirre was the father of this movement. Iban Silueta, Un, Dos, Tres, L'Escondite Inglés. These are films you hear 1, 2, 3, English Hide and Seek. 69, Leos Pardo, 1976, and Leo's Brown. So they were type of alternative directors, very an alternative scene, very and Almodovar would come out of this. Um, he's a figure very much of the transition in Spain of the Destape, of La Movida Madrileña. He was a key part of that, of a new Spain, a different Spain. Makes great comments. For example, like Almodovar says, "I know nothing of Franco. I do not belong to a Franco's past. This was the break that Spain wanted to make." The Spanish government. Um, it's very interesting when to see that Almodovar's films, which might appear a lot of them soft porn, really kind of are financed by the Spanish Ministry of Culture. So Almodovar is portraying an image of Spain abroad as this liberal new country, a rupture with the Francoist past, as we say, in new Spanish cinema. Um, Another great comment of Almodovar is that I was born on the moon. I come actually born from Albacete, and I would argue his films are profoundly Spanish and deal with rural. They deal, you see, whenever I'm abroad and you miss Spain, I live in New Zealand or Australia, you watch an Almodovar film. I'm a global director. These films are not about, but I would think profoundly Spanish, but whether it's Madrid, whether it's the villages, whether it's Barcelona, but he doesn't deal with, he shies away from the political themes, um, sociocultural themes deliberately, um, uh, which in many ways suits a kind of a Spanish governmental. That he comes from, he worked with Telefonica, worked telephone company. He was a Spanish. He's gay, um, which again, a new Spain, a different Spain, and in many ways, by all of his films take characters from the outside, from the alternative. You see drug use, um, um, even Women on the Verge of an Eras Breakdown, Ada. This, but very paradoxically, by using these kind of marginal figures, he brings the margin. Almodovar, who is now really, to be honest, he's a government sponsored director, so he brings the margins into the center. So bizarrely, the marginal figures now in Spanish society through Almodovar have become quite central in Spanish culture. So it's an interesting kind of almost, we say, bouleversement or upheaval there. First film he makes, I think I always get embarrassed every year when after doing this lecture, and you're going to say his first feature film is 1975. Remember the year Franco dies, and that's Foye, Foye, Foye Me Tim, which is, translation is fuck me, fuck me, fuck me, Tim. So you can see what kind of a film that was. I mean, it's up in the LRA, but you're all over 18. Um, so really, really strong film. So he's coming from this. You can see this. This is not. There's no mention of the Spanish Civil War and fuck me, fuck me, fuck me, Tim. We're not meant like Franco. Kind of those issues are left out. Quite similarly, the second feature film is Pepe Lucy Bomb, y otras chicas del montón. So Pepe Lucy Bomb and a load of other girls, 1980. Again, quite similar themes. Um, um, Lots and lots of sex, golden showers, really kind of stuff that you hadn't seen before from a sexual type of content. Very, very risque type of films in this Destape Movida Madrileña. What's incredible is these films are sponsored by the Minister for Culture, because this is the new Spain. They want to portray the socialist government, particularly after 82. They come behind and they're going to finance Almodovar, because we want the image of Spain we want abroad. We want this image of the Spain kind of a liberal, conservative Spain. I would argue, liberal, anti-conservative, where transsexual, drug use, being gay. I would argue Almodovar, we talk about this, is not personal blame on him, but Spain still is, and this is shown with the rise of Vox and political parties, such, is still a quite deeply divided country with a lot of social conservative people. That's shown in Madrid, the gay neighborhood where Almodovar would hold Chueca is almost like a ghetto, because it's like when you go to Berlin or something and there's no gay neighborhood, or Copenhagen, there's no gay in Spain. I mean, it's the gayest place you've ever been. If you want to go to Chueca, it's full of gay people. Um, um, but that presupposes that the rest of the country isn't. I remember going there once. There was a festival of Alaska Dinarama, and actually police encircling the area, protecting it. I mean, that's a bizarre kind of. But the image abroad of Spain, Almodovar film, is that Spain is. I would say argue that for a person whose alternative was different, who's gay, quite difficult in outside of Madrid, Barcelona, the big cities, and that's shown. And those and still huge problems in Spain with gender issues, and gender equality, problems with domestic abuse, which come from those. I worked in a school years ago in Spain. There was a poster, AOL, da igual, which is him or her. It's all the one, and people were using it as a dartboard. You get that in Spain, and very much that's endemic in Spanish culture. Mujer al volante, peligro constante, woman at the wheel, a constant danger. Like and this is from educated people. You'd hear these comments made. Again, women are expected to be good looking. Um, 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 that type of if you go to any Spanish smallest town, you'll find beauticians. Instead, you don't find them in a Danish or Swedish where you have gender equality. You don't find the same concentration of hairs of people having to look a certain way. But those aren't dealt with in Almodovar. We get that Labyrinth de Pasiones, 1982, Enter Tinieblas, 1983. His breakthrough film then, What Have I Done to Deserve This? Que Hecho para Merecer Esto, 1984. Really, really strong film as breakthrough. And then Matador, 1986. I want to comment on that for a minute. Matador is where Antonio Banderas, it's his first film he's a young, very good looking guy from Malaga. He's in the film, and it's a film about a very profoundly Spanish theme of bullfighting, Opus Dei. We have a kind of a religious. Antonio Banderas is super religious, lives with his mother, a member of this Catholic kind of cult. Becomes quite obsessed with the neighbor. Now, I want to stay with me for a second and kind of shock him, but we get so in the film. Then he starts to follow around. That is stalking, but when we watch Almodovar, we almost lose our moral compass. And that, of course, gets back to the idea of social responsibility of a director. We're watching him, Mr. Matador, and then he tries to have sex with her outside the flat, but he's not able to ejaculate or come. So, and she slaps him, and he goes back to his mother. And we watch the film and say, hold on, that's a rape, but he's not punished in you know what I mean. There's no comments made in this, which I would argue is very irresponsible in a country. Very irresponsible. It's wrong. Full stop. But irresponsible in a country where we have Spain very very high levels of domestic abuse and issue with gender relations. So if films come out like this, and that's comments you'll hear me making about the end of the film ends up in a bullfighter, and they die in a kind of having sex with each other in a very very strong scene, beautifully shot, lovely music, great soundtracks, but no comment on what's actually happening in Spain at a time from a social culture point of view. Continues women on the verge of a nervous breakdown. Again, that was his won the Oscar for Mujeres al Borde de Ataque de Nervios, wins the Oscar for Best Foreign Film. We see again the same themes: drug use. There's an aid terrorist in it. Everyone, but very little breakthrough commentary on these issues. Similarly with High Heels, Tacones Lejanos, beautifully shot in Madrid. But Tie Me Up, Tie Me Down, it's Atame, it's just Tie Me Up in Spanish. But for the American market, because it was seen as that's too risque, so we had to tie them down. So Tie Me Up, Tie Me Down. Beautiful Kika, again, rape scenes, very, certain scenes which are common to Spain and Almodovar, you will see they often go back to the village at the end. We see this in Atame where they drive to the village in Pueblo Abandonado. And that's another, there is I mean, Almodovar films are beautifully shot, don't get me wrong, that the redemptive kind of part of a village after redemptive of the countryside. So that city countryside, that's something you can explore in essays or FYPs as you move on. The redemptive power of the countryside, which we said we see in Ireland. Um, 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 Very much in our cinema where we had Into the West. We commented upon that in the lecture last week. Flight of the Doves, the west of Ireland is where things are at. That's where we'll find purity, we'll find redemption. Where's Almodovar getting this from? He's getting this from La Españolada. And he admits he's heavily influenced by that exaggerated form of Spanishness. So the argument I would make is when he says he's nothing to do with the Spanish past. Oh, yes, he has. And and the films that he would have grown up watching, he's using them. So there's definitely a legacy of that type of 1930s Spanish cinema in. Quite controversial, I would say, because it was cinema films like even the Mari Solindos would be probably more influential for Almodovar than the films of Asaura or Berlanga. Heavily influenced also by American cinema. And that's Seven Brides for Seven Brothers type of films. All About My Mother then wins the Oscar for Best Foreign Film, 1999. Todos Up Mi Madre, again, Penelope Cruz. Beautiful, the shots, the cars driving around La Sagrada Familia in Barcelona. Um, but A lot of drug use in the film, but again, comments not really made in this. Continues with films before we want to book this Biggest Luna, but we want to mention Hable con ella, Talk to Her, beautiful Almodovar film. I think we mentioned it briefly last week about someone who's again, everyone's good looking, everyone's pretty. She's in a car crash, she's in a coma. Benigno, who's from Celador, a port in a hospital, takes care of her, makes love to her. Hold on, it's rape, like again, and but she gets married into the film. She comes out of her coma. Maleducación, bad education. Again, it's about two young boys in a seminary, beautifully shot. People say it's autobiographical. It's shot in Albacete, that area of Spain where Almodovar would have grown up, and they fall in love. Young kids in the seminary. The whole is questionable, and then he falls in love with a priest, falls in love with one of them, and go, hold on, that's firstly, it's the abuse of position of power, where someone's an educator and as a child in their care. And then secondly, it's actually pedophilia as well. In later life, then he meets the priest again, and they fall in love, and often you watch Almodovar you get, I would almost say, lulled into a sense of this is Spain, but there's a very good essay there for somebody on questionable morality in the films of Pedro Almodovar, and it's some again questionable morality in Spanish society, and is Almodovar simply a mirror of this. We'll see it when we talk about Santiago Segura and the Torrente films, which became a phenomenon in Spain over the last 10, 15 years, again, about a corrupt, racist ex-policeman on the beat in Madrid who becomes like who should be a scumbag, but he becomes a hero, an almost anti-hero for many in Spanish society. And throughout the films, actually throughout the Torrente films, we see many stars appearing. Carlos Moya, the tennis player, um, different models, actresses, Javier Bardem. Why are they appearing in these films? But that they want to be seen in these films. The riveted players, Iker Casillas, Guti, make all these cameo roles. It became cool to be seen in this with this very questionable, obviously total figure. Um, that's these disturbing comments on Spanish society that we just wanted to make. Hold on one second. I just wanted to, because we were just wanted to be a reference here for the recent Almodovar's Pain and, because I've seen it in Spanish, but I just make sure it's called Pain and Glory in English. Yeah, Pain, Dolor Doria. Pain and Glory, which is one of Almodovar's most recent kind of like 2019 again. Again, returns to a lot of these themes. I was watching it, preparing for this last week. Actually on television, you don't see it was on. Was it film 4? Um, I've seen it before, but I was rewatching it, and again, um, um, it's about a cinema director. It's semi-autobiographical, Almodovar, um, and he's recalling the mistakes he made in his past, cherishing the beautiful moments of his life, recreating his childhood in a camera reel. And it's Antonio Banderas as an older man. Penelope Cruz plays his mother as a younger. It's a beautifully shot film. It's really, really, um, um, and um, um, but at the end there is again questionable scene where you see and so what watches are we going to see, as we said last week, the every Spanish film we see nudity, some sexual scenes. Yeah, there's a scene really just where he's a young kid and then it shows his first El Primer Deseo, and there's an older Tyler inside in the house. But once again, suddenly you go to, is this right? It's beautifully shot. It looks his first love. Is he 11, 12-year-old boy, and just this kind of maybe 19-year-old. Is this correct? Is this obviously morally it's very questionable, but so I'd argue right up until now there's this questionable morality um, in the films of Pedro Almodovar. Biggest Luna, want to speak about Bilbao, 1978. Um, again, quite overt, a lot of sexual imagery. Renacer, he makes in Hollywood, 81, Reborn. Lola, 83. But I think it's the Iberian trilogy that I want to really talk about. And that's his real contribution to Spanish cinema. And it's 3 films that come out in the early 90s. The Tit and the Moon, La Teta y la Luna, which is very interesting that it reflects that it's shot in Catalan, French, and Spanish. So it reflects those, which in itself is, it's about a traveling circus, and that's it's probably the least well known, but it's a movie well worth seeing. The least well known of the Iberian trilogy. The other 2, yeah, films beautifully shot, but I think they're films that need to be seen, and I would argue from a cinematic perspective, and cinema's contribution to sociocultural change or reflections of society, they're worth far more than the films of Almodovar. It's controversial to say. Jamón, love relationship, deals with, it's Penelope Cruz and Javier Bardem. We're actually together as a couple now. But it deals very much with that question of gender equality in Spain and machismo. Machismo, which is exaggerated male behavior. He's the macho in the film. Very, very strong in that. And there's again, some ways dealt with inappropriately. Is he the hero, the macho? I think he is. We see poor Jordi Moya. He's the rich kid, so it deals with that idea in Spain of inequality as well. He's a rich kid who, again, attempts to rapes Penelope Cruz in the film. So if you think I'm an apologist for Bigas Luna, watch the film, and there's a famous scene with the runner and Osborne Bull. He goes up and she's his girlfriend, but she doesn't want to make love to him. But he makes that's rape. But he's not arrested. He's not. But he's. She breaks up with him. So what? But I mean, it's just, and then goes off with the other macho. But it definitely there's a strong commentary on that of machismo and its position in Spanish society. Penelope Cruz's mother is a prostitute. We see really Stefania Sandrelli, who was in The Conformist, famous Italian actress from the 1970s, and but it's a film that's really worth watching as such. We see the kind of it was a huge issue in Spain, 1980s, 1990s, rich kids and the poor versus rich, and those type of los que tienen, los que no tienen, those who have, those who don't have, which led to the Spanish Civil War. And we see this played out on the screen in Jamón Jamón. Really strong film. Golden Balls, again, deals with Javier Bardem, once again, is the star. He's a poor guy who decides to, kind of starts off and deals even with relationships of he's in the Spanish colonies in Ceuta, where he's on military service. He has a Muslim girlfriend, an Arab. So we see these relationships and that those things are played out. That I think and the question of racism in Spain, and those things are played out. He comes to Spain. He wants to build the biggest tower in Benidorm. I was in Benidorm recently, and I was thinking of this film and certain characters referred to in the film at the time in Spain. There was a corrupt mayor, Jesus Gil, GIL, who also owned the Atletico Madrid football club, but he was the mayor of Marbella. If you go to Marbella today, Puerto Banús, it's creations of Jesus Gil, who then created his own political party, Partido Grupo Independiente Liberal, the Liberal Independent Group, Partido Gil. So the Gil Party. And it was him who made Marbella what it is, but some of the policies was he got rid of the prostitutes. He put them all in vans, drove them up to the hills and threw them out with their high heels. I mean, so we got this kind of macho figure, Jesus Gil, racist overtones of a huge of corruption. He did go to jail and he passed away since, but a large life character. Figure in Spain was going to fight the figure in the film Golden Balls, whose approach to finance Benito's project. Benito Gonzalez is he's called Gil. So there's this overt rich corruption, very strong sexual imagery again. Julio Iglesias music appears in the film, and in the end of the film, we see the kind of relationship between Spain and America. As they go to Florida, he escapes after we see the idea of some of the workers die in the site, and he himself is in a crash, so he's in America. As the first film of Benicio del Toro, who would want to be one of the great actors of our generation, but he's in this great scene which shows commentary on Spanish-American relations, American side in Florida, where there's a guy with a Mickey Mouse, and he's waving as the cars come by, and suddenly, I'm trying to get in this, I should be able to get my hands on the screen here and do it, and suddenly he turns and goes like this, and sort of very acidic, acerbic commentary on American society of the 1990s, American capitalist society, as it makes those comments on Spanish society. And the idea is that it's part of that Spain of the 1990s where people would just want to property developers. We saw it in the Celtic Tiger. So um, um, there's definitely a comparison between all those figures you read about, the Johnny Ronans and the property developers and the Quinns and Benito Gonzalez in Golden Balls. Um, it shows the Spain of excess. He has two Rolexes. Um, there's this. He goes to bed with two women at the same time. He wants two of everything, and of course he has two golden balls. That's the kind of title of the film. So I think Biggest Loon is something that's passed not under the radar in the Iberian trilogy. I think some Spaniards didn't like some of the films because they were too close to the bone, and they do reflect badly on Spanish society and are quite hard hitting as such. But but I would argue that he's a director. I think in 10, 20 years' time, uh, there will definitely be retrospectives of the work of Bigas Luna, and people will perhaps take his work. I won't be the only guy writing about him. That uh, much more serious than it has been taken hitherto. Must mention at the end with Torrente, with regional cinema in Spain is something that came about. There was very little of any regional cinema in Francoist Spain. And that's something which is important in Spain because Spain is a country which has a, wow, very fragile fabric with regions, Catalonia, breakaway regions, different independence. I think film reflects this. Um, the Basque Country, Galicia, 477 Tatuaje Bigas Luna himself talks about Catalan. And we have Francesc Betriu's 1982, La Plaza del Diamant in Catalan, which, you know, when it first came out, it was the largest seen film in Spain. That was in Catalonia alone. So I think film, going back to our question about sociopolitical, film reflects very well sociopolitical change in Spanish society with this upsurge in regional cinema in the Basque Country, because people could see into screens this type of different. We're different. You'll see that in films like Moncho Armendarif, who's a Basque director, 27 Horas, The Beautiful Secretos del Corazon, Secrets of the Heart. Different films about a different Spain. Imanol Uribe's La Muerte de Miquel actually deals overtly with ETA and terrorism and the independence struggle in the Basque Country. And that comes out in 1984, which is really early. So regional cinema is something that is important as a mirror to those changes in Spain. Okay, I don't want to do too much more as I tend to rant about these things. I have been receiving a lot of emails from people about the essay as such. It's for because some people weren't able to. I think Irene from Greece, you weren't able to in week one. Um, it's for Friday of week 12, the last. That's week 13 for some people. The last lective week, whatever it is, that 5 o'clock. Don't be worrying. I won't be. We're going to get in a fight, but we have to put a time up. It's 5. And the essay, I want you to do it. Something. What brought you to this module? Now, you might say to me, you were brought to this module because you were told to do it, or you're forced, or it's obligatory. But for a lot of people, you chose to do it or chose to discourse. Think about something you're interested in that has a relationship, however tenuous, with films. It could be you could be interested in soundtracks in film. You could be interested specifically in Spanish film. You could be interested in analysing a scene. It could be, as I said, Frozen and its impact on society, Walt Disney and cinema. Then it could be Italian neorealism. You might have liked the stuff on the Arab cinema. You might want to look at something like Yusuf Chahine. And I want you to do, I know we're getting in now, we're in week 9. So it's to do a bit of reading around view some articles, have a bibliography, and then do a piece. So it's a free choice. Like in this university, you're told to do so many things. So I think it's good to sometimes get a choice to because you'll be doing this as you move on with your FYPs and those type of things. Um, and I think I've said, or I'll put up, it's 1,500 words. But again, don't be worrying if you're under or over. But we need to put up a kind of excuse me, some type of a marker. And so really, whatever you're kind of interested in, we've had could be fashion and cinema. Um, it could be about a certain type of cinema, Greek cinema. It could be something different. It could be something excuse me, from one of the lectures. It could be a comparison of Almodovar and Bigas Luna. You know that we've kind of covered today. It could be something about the legacy of the Spanish Civil War in Spanish cinema that we've covered today and last week. So choose something that you that interests you, that you feel you get something out of, um, and and um, um, and that's the assessment. Again, this course is different, and it's different. Maybe when you're doing maybe a language or something, but you have to yes the grammar. I just hope you get something out of this, and hopefully for most of you that you'll. I hope I don't destroy cinema for you because that's what happens often in film studies courses. But that you'll get some idea of some of the major themes in cinema that will guide you. You could have an essay on Weekend at Bernie's. You could move from that to one of the other, Back to the Future, one of those films, Truman Show. But so, yeah, I really like that. Could be Scorsese, who we talk about. And we could, I want to do it on Taxi Driver. I want to do it the films of Scorsese, violence in Scorsese. That why don't we see any black people in Scorsese? Don't even go there. Do go there. Please go there. There's an essay for you, kind of that reflects a kind of a white America, you know, and so you have those. Is that Scorsese's fault? Is that or Scorsese and Italian neorealism? Those type of things. So any of those themes, think about that and get the essay in. Okay, because as this course is more about hopefully that you get something out of it, enjoy it, um, and hopefully return to cinema maybe next year, or some of you will go back to home universities, um, and maybe take up a cinema course. But that you'll, or and I hope that some of the themes you talk about are applicable. Things like a moral compass or a lack of a moral compass will be applicable or will be relevant to to all your studies, rather than just that this course we had to watch this film and analyze it, watch this film and analyze it. That we're trying to get a broader picture to you as such. Okay, so that's brilliant. Now let me stop and save this, and I'll see you next week. Okay, until then, you're probably aware we're talking about Ukraine, we're talking all this, and it's so important. There are rising COVID numbers. We're just so at the moment it's worked up until now with this class. We probably won't go back in next week. There's people I know in the class who are positive, the record number back in hospital, and I have no control over. Jesus, obviously, just restrictions or whether they reintroduce mask wearing or this or that. But people are jittery and legitimately so. So all I can say to yourselves is, like, as I wish I hadn't been saying this again because I've stopped saying it, but be careful, lads, and mind yourselves, and each other, and we'll get through this course, and hopefully there'll be obviously with the shadow of Ukraine behind in around us, but in much brighter days ahead. Okay, mind yourselves. All the best. Take care. Bye bye.